morning. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Mick and happy Bookmas. First, I have to let you know it's actually frigid in my apartment right now. Our AC slash, well, heater more accurately, is broken and it's 52 degrees outside, which means it's probably 50 something degrees in here. So I have a blanket on my lap, I'm wearing sweatpants, thick socks, and I made myself a hot coffee for this reading wrap up that we're about to do because it is incredibly cold. Also, just have to say, every time I wear this little denim overshirt, I feel like Chessie from The Parent Trap. Anyways, welcome to my October and November reading wrap up. I was in a slump and because of that, my stack, she's small, okay? She is not super hefty and a few of these were in reading vlogs, so I'm gonna do my best not to hit you over the head with things I've already said, but I told myself I was gonna do wrap ups for every single month this year. I'm sticking to it. We're in the home stretch. Okay, we only have one left, so we're doing it. And also, I read some good books, so I would like to tell you about them. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the stats. Starting off not so strong with October. This was my, I think, potentially worst reading month of the year. I read 2 books in October. They were both romances, so no genre split to speak of. One of them was from my 7-book monthly TBR, and I read no books from my 24 and 2024 list. So we are looking a little bleak on that front at this point in the year, y'all. I have to be so honest with you. We are not faring well on the 24 and 2024 list. Of that, I only read 836 pages in those 2 books combined, but my average star rating for the month was 4.5 because I love them both. And since I know that the stats are like everyone's favorite part of these videos, I'm gonna go ahead and do November stats right here, right now as well. So in November, I read 5 books. So coming out of the slump, I'm feeling good about reading now. I said that multiple times throughout the month and it maybe wasn't true until now. But I read 1 thriller, 1 fantasy, 1 romance, 1 literary fiction, and 1 holiday romance. I read 1 out of 6 books on my monthly TBR. Not ideal, but I read 1 out of 24 on my 24 and 2024 list, which I think this puts me, I didn't even check this, but I think in total, I read 13 out of 24. It is December 3rd. Anyways, I read 1,685 pages. My average star rating was 3.9. So 2 decently solid reading months in terms of my enjoyment level of the books I read, just quantity-wise, a little bit lower. That would be thanks to the slump. So anyways, glad she's over. Now let's talk about the books. I don't want to put this down because it's keeping me warm, but I have to hold up my book. The first book that I read in October was Happy Medium by Sarah Adler. This was my first book by Sarah Adler that I've ever read. I've heard a lot about her other book, Mrs. Nash's Ashes, but I honestly had only heard, I think, 1 person talk about this, and for some reason, just stuck in the back of my mind. I think specifically because I know how much I enjoy magical realism in romance books, and this has ghosts in it. So when I heard that, I was immediately intrigued and had immediately added it to my TBR. And then I wanted to read some seasonal festive books in the month of October, and one night I was just feeling particularly in need of being able to do something mindless because something like lifey had happened, and I reached for this and I ended up really enjoying it. And I wasn't expecting to, honestly. I was expecting it to be cute, fluffy, and nothing crazy, like nothing that would break out of the 3-star range, but it did for me, I fear. If you have never heard of Happy Medium. Basically, it's about our main girl, Gretchen, who is a fake medium. She cons people, she pretends to contact the dead for people, perform seances, etc, etc. She can't actually speak to ghosts, she is lying. And one day, on request from one of her most loyal customers, she goes to pay a visit to a farm that is apparently haunted, dealing with hauntings, and promises to attempt to like perform an exorcism basically, or just cleanse the space of spirits to make sure that whoever's haunting the space is not evil or whatever. And she gets there, she meets the grumpy, attractive farmer who owns this farm. It is immediately met with a lot of anger, a lot of hatred, because he thinks she's a con artist. And so she's like, whatever, I'm getting out of here. I'm not gonna stay and help someone that is gonna be so mean to me. And then as she's leaving, she runs into the ghost that's haunting the place. But yeah, she ends up staying and attempting to convince Mr. Farmer Man there is an actual ghost living on his property, and also kind of having to contend with the fact that like he really doesn't believe her. He really thinks she's a con artist, and honestly for most of her life she was. So even though she wants to disprove him, she knows there's like a fear in the back of her mind that everything that he's saying about her is right. So honestly, there was a little more depth to it than I was expecting, and as we know at this point, that's really what I enjoy in a romance book. Like, I like a cute, fluffy, no brainpower kind of read, but I like it when there's a little something more. A little pull quote at the top on the back says, "A sincere and sincerely funny romance," and I would have to agree. It was just really cute. It was very fast-paced, very easy to read. I liked the characters. The ghost character, actually, I also really enjoyed him. I really did not know what to expect going into this, but the premise ended up being being executed very well, although my one complaint, I really did enjoy the romance and I really did believe it between the two characters, but Mr. Man, what's his name? Charlie? He was mean sometimes. You know, he would find himself, you know, maybe developing feelings or being a little endeared towards Miss Gretchen, and then he would remember that she's a con artist, and then he would really lash out in a way because he was like mad at himself for, you know, slipping a little bit. But you know, he did it a lot and he did it very far into the book. I'll be honest with you, he does not believe her for a really long time, and so well into when they are already like developing feelings for each other, he's still doing that, which I like to a certain extent because I love a slow burn, and obviously I like when there's something standing in the way of two people being able to get together, because I don't like insta love and I don't like when the tension is resolved too quickly. But there were certain times where he was taking it a little far. There's no way for me to know if this is objectively like an incredible book or if it just was the right book at the right time for me, because like I said, something was going on in my life. I needed something to just sit down and binge, and I had such a good time and it made me really happy and it made me emotional. I cried at the end. Like, I truly enjoyed the reading experience. So glad I read it when I did. By the way, I gave it 4 stars, which based on the Goodreads rating is maybe generous of me, but like I said, I had a great time. I really enjoyed it, and now I really want to pick up Sarah Adler's other books. She has another book called Mrs. Nash's Ashes, like I said, although I will say my friend Maddie did DNF Mrs. Nash's Ashes, so we will see. But personally, I really enjoyed her writing. I really enjoyed this book. 4 stars. Book number 2 in October was You Again by Kate Goldbeck, which I've had on my TBR since last year and it's taken me forever to pick up, and I'm so mad at myself because y'all, I gave this 5 stars. This was one of those where when I finished it, I had the 5-star feeling. I wasn't 100% sure that I could give it 5 stars. Like, I was like, maybe somewhere between 4.5 and 5. And I kept thinking about it, and I kept thinking about how much I enjoyed it and how much of like a fun time it was, how much of a fun concept it was, how well executed it was, and also this cover. So I settled on 5 stars. When I finished it, I started to look at some other Goodreads reviews, and then I was like, you know what? I had a great time. I really enjoyed it. I could go through and find out specifically what makes people rate this so low and find out what they didn't like about it. But I enjoyed it so much that I'm standing by her as a 5-star. I 100% can see how this wouldn't work for everyone. It's very messy. The characters are often really unlikable and they make dumb decisions. And they're not like your stereotypical like perfect guy, perfect girl, but with one flaw that she has to overcome kind of romance. It's very real. I'm discovering that I really like flawed characters in romance because if I'm being honest, they were also pretty flawed in Happy Medium, I would say, both of them. I think it just goes like that extra step for really making them feel like real people, because hey, in real life, everyone is kind of weird, everyone's kind of messed up multiple times in their lives, everyone's kind of damaged, especially like the older you get. And so I really appreciated that about this. I don't know. If you've never heard of You Again by Kate Goldbeck, it's basically marketed as like a When Harry Met Sally retelling but gender swapped, which I don't feel like is 100% accurate. It's more so like on the utmost basic level, yes, that's true, because it's about our 2 characters, Ari and Josh, who meet when Ari is living with the girl that he's dating, and they realize that both of them are hooking up with her. So they kind of start off on the wrong foot, and then they run into each other multiple times over the years, eventually establish a friendship, and then it's sort of this thing of like both of them are attempting to get back out there, really get back into the dating world because they both have baggage, they both gone through things, and it's that like age-old question, can men and women really be friends, kind of that When Harry Met Sally kind of tries to do. But I would definitely say this is different. Like, it feels very different. It feels a lot more modern, but I will say it does the slow burn thing equally as well. And I feel like the conflict makes sense to me. Again, both of them have baggage, both of them have a not so great track history with relationships, so it makes sense they would have trouble getting into one themselves and like making that work. There were just so many things about this and about the process of them trying to get over hurdles, ultimately get together, that made so much sense to me and didn't feel like contrived, you know? The tension was so good. He noticed her, he really knew her, he really saw her. For the most part, obviously there had to be things that he was misunderstanding about her for there to be conflict towards the end, but like in a lot of the ways that mattered, he really saw her, you know what I mean? And I just really loved the ending. I cried. I thought it was really sweet. I thought it was goofy. The banter was really good. The texting and flirting was funny throughout. I had a great time. I had a great time. I would recommend it. I would recommend it if you like messy people making dumb decisions and being a little bit frustrating. And I will say the beginning was a little bit slow. Like I said, I ended with the 5-star feeling, so I had to go with 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I would highly recommend. I can't believe that that's a debut novel. I'm so excited to see what Kate Goldbeck does next because that was good. That was really good. Okay, and then in November, first of all, I read If We Were Villains by ML Rio, which is a mystery thriller situation about a theater troupe at this prestigious elite arts college where they basically only learn and perform Shakespeare. Something happens in this group of friends while they're at school, and then this book takes place dual timeline 10 years on from the event, and our main character Oliver Marks has been in prison for 10 years for the incident that happened, and we don't know at the beginning what the incident was, what happened, who it happened to. All we know is that Oliver went to prison for it, and he is finally gonna be telling the true story to the police officer that originally worked on the case, because the police officer has retired and he just wants to know because it's always bothered him and he's always wanted the truth. And so Oliver goes with him back to the school, basically walks him through everything that happened, and then as he's doing that, we cut back and forth to like the actual timeline 10 years ago and are living it firsthand. I really liked this. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. I'm learning that I really love dark academia and things that make me feel the way that The Secret History did when I first read it. I think I said this in the reading vlog where I talked about this, but it feels like a slightly easier to digest version of The Secret History with a lot of Shakespeare instead of like the Greek classics. So a lot of what I heard in negative reviews about this initially is people said there was like too much Shakespeare, it was really distracting, etc, etc. Honestly, I don't know that much about Shakespeare. Like, I didn't understand all the foreshadowing and the nuances that were being executed with all the inclusion of the Shakespeare and whatnot, but I still really enjoyed it. Now, I am an ex-theater kid, so that could really be why I really enjoyed like the theater setting of it all and like the way like relationships form in environments like that. Like, that's something that I'm familiar with from my high school years, so I liked that part. But I feel like the complaint of it having too much Shakespeare and it being hard to understand, honestly, I feel like you can get away with kind of just skimming the Shakespearean lines because you don't have to sit there and like dissect it and really deeply understand the Shakespeare inclusion of it all. Like, I feel like you can just kind of skim it, get an overall idea of like what it is they're talking about, and then just continue focusing on the characters and like their dialogue and their actions and stuff to really understand what's going on. I don't think you have to understand Shakespeare. I wouldn't let that intimidate you if it has when you've heard people talk about it. Or I guess, or so I would say, go into it with that mindset. Like, go into it knowing there's gonna be a lot of Shakespeare, but knowing it's okay if you can't follow it and don't understand it, and just kind of skim over it and move on. I don't know if that's terrible advice, but that's kind of what I had to do because Shakespeare has always been kind of hard to digest for me. And I think on a reread, I would like to sit with the Shakespeare of it all and really try and understand everything. But I didn't do that this time around. I still gave it 4.5 stars. So do with that what you will. The vibes were perfect. Even though it took me so long to read, I think I would have had the 5-star feeling and given it 5 stars if I'd read it quicker. But I really enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed how clear cut and defined they felt. Really liked the relationships between them, nuances of how they evolved over their time at school and pre and post incident. I just really liked it. I was really impressed. This is another one that I can see how it's not for everyone, but it was really for me. Me and dark academia these days are like this. Next, I read One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig, which is a new adult gothic fantasy book about a girl named Elspeth Spindle who lives in a kingdom that's basically being overtaken by this mist that either kills people or gives them powers. And usually people that are infected with the illness and given powers are executed, but Elspeth has managed to fly under the radar and hide the fact that she has magic. That magic being a monster that lives in her head and can sometimes take over her body and give her supernatural strength and abilities. So basically the plot of this is she meets a group of people that are working together to try and put together a group of magical cards that will, in theory, dispel the mist and end the curse on the land and save anyone that's been infected, which is really what she wants. She doesn't want to have this monster living in her head anymore. So incredibly interesting premise. I think it's very well executed. The vibes are really well done. I ended up settling on 4 stars. I think in my reading vlog I gave it 4.5, no, 4.25, but I ended up settling on 4 because I think once I get into the 4+ star range, that's like a long-term all-time favorite for me. So the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I think this is a 4 star. There's a chance that I think the next book could be rated a little higher. We'll see, because I'm pretty sure I know what the premise, like the setup of it is going to be, and that's gonna be intriguing. I don't know. I liked the romance. It took a little bit to grow on me, but I ended up really enjoying it, even though it was a little bit formulaic in terms of characters, I guess, but I had a good time, and I would highly recommend if you're in the mood for something gothic, spooky, foggy fantasy. I wish that they'd done a little bit more with the card hunting. I think that could have been interesting, but I understand why they didn't, and I'm intrigued to see where the second book goes. So 4 stars, book number 2 in November. Next, I read a novel love story by Ashley Poston, which is another one of her cute little magical realism romances, and I liked it but didn't love it. Basically, this one is about a girl who stumbles into the town of her favorite romance series, and that premise is so interesting. It was so exciting to me when I first heard it, and I like literally pre-ordered this book, and then I've had it since, I think it came out in like April or May, something like that, and then I never touched it because I started hearing mixed reviews about it, and unfortunately I ended up falling on the, you know, more negative side of the spectrum, just because I feel like because I was so excited about this premise and I had such high expectations and such high hopes, it just fell a little bit flat for me. I think the pacing of this was a little bit interesting. The nature of her reaction was super interesting. Like, she was kind of just like, oh, I'm I'm here, cool. And then she never really reacted beyond that. And then also I think especially in the beginning, like the first half of the book, none of the characters felt real to me. I feel like because I knew they were just characters in the book, it was hard for me to like feel attached to them or connected to them at all. Even the love interest was really hard to get a read on for like the whole first half of the book. And then when the romance actually really picked up, I still felt like I didn't really have an understanding of who this character was. I don't know, he didn't feel like a super nuanced, like fleshed out character, which is not what you want in a romance book. You're supposed to be like really connected to the love interest. So not ideal. As always, I loved her writing. It was super fast paced, super easy to read. I really enjoyed myself in terms of the writing. It's just the story itself. I had higher expectations. I wanted more from it. I feel like the premise was super strong, but the execution just didn't live up to it. So still worth the read, I think, which is why I gave it 3.5, because I still enjoyed it and I still think she's a great writer. Just execution wise, plot wise, and character wise, not 100% for me. So yeah. Next I read The Most by Jessica Anthony. I bought because it was a Barnes & Noble monthly pick, and one of the Barnes & Noble booksellers just basically handed it to me when I was checking out and was like, you should read this. It's about weird people doing weird things. Quite frankly, it's really not. About a married couple in the 1950s that kind of have a bit of a troubled relationship, and one day the woman gets in the swimming pool of their apartment complex and then refuses to get out, but it's not as dramatic as it sounds. It ended up just being a very basic domestic drama where both of them had secrets and thoughts and feelings about the history of their relationship, which we kind of went through in this really short 130 something page book. End of the day, it was nothing to write home about. I've already kind of forgotten it, so yeah. I didn't rate it because I couldn't, but I think if I did, I would give it a 2.5 maybe? I don't know. And then lastly, I just read Snowed In on my Kindle, so I don't have a physical copy. That's the holiday romance that I read this month or last month. It's gonna be in a Bookmas video coming soon, so I'm not gonna go super far in depth into it, but basically it's about a woman who left her fiance at the altar 5-ish years ago, and she has to go home to her hometown for Christmas for the first time since then, and she's terrified to go home and face everyone that she knows hates her because of how invested everyone was in their relationship and how much everyone loved her fiance. So when she stumbles into an acquaintance in Dublin before going home he's also from her hometown. He also is looking for kind of a buffer when he goes home for Christmas, and so he proposes that they fake date to kind of get everyone off their backs and have each other's backs in tricky situations like the ones that she knows she's gonna face. And yeah, they go home to their small Irish town, they fake date, they meet each other's families, spend a lot of time with each other's families, and it's cute. Exactly what you would want out of a fluffy holiday romance, and I'm glad I read it, so yeah. This book made me realize that I think I don't love like a rich MMC as a microtrope. I don't know what it is, but when that's something that they talk about a decent amount, like the MMC being well off, for some reason I just don't really like it. Like, it's not my favorite. I'm kind of realizing that maybe billionaire romances won't be for me. This one was handled well. Like, it's not like he was like obnoxiously rich or annoying about it or anything, but I just found myself being like, anytime they mentioned it. Very strange, but it's true. So anyways, with all that being said, these are the 7 books that I read in the months of October and November. I'm really glad to have read all of these. I had a really great time with so many of them. Found some new favorites, found some new authors that I'm going to be looking into moving forward, and overall had a really good time. No, I was slumpy, so I'm glad that I'm not slumpy anymore because that was getting really exhausting. So yeah. Anyways, as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you're enjoying Bookmas, and I hope I'll see you in the next one. Bye!